Hello everybody, and this is Dr. Vishal Trivedi from Department of Biosciences and Bioengineering, IIT Guwahati. And today we are going to discuss about a new topic, and the name of this topic is the sexual reproduction in flowering plant. So, before discussing about the integrate mechanism of the reproduction in flowering plant, let us discuss what are the different modes of reproduction in the plant system. So, in the plant system, the reproduction can be by two modes. One is called asexual reproduction, and the second one is called as sexual reproduction. What is mean by the asexual reproduction is that the vegetative part of the plant will give rise to the new plant. So, in the asexual reproduction, the plant reproduces itself and does not require the help of the specialized organ or the specialized system. So, in this case of mode, the plant part give rise to new plant, where in which there is no sexual organs are required. For example, the root give rise to new plant. So, the alternate name of the sexual reproduction could be that vegetative propagation. You can have stems giving new plant, and example in this category is potato. Example in this category is the sweet potato. Similarly, if you have leaves, they may give rise to the new plant. An example in this is bryophylla. Okay. So, in this kind of plant, in this kind of asexual, in this kind of reproduction mode, the there is no specialized sex organs are required. Whereas, in the case of sexual reproduction, the sexual reproduction requires two different types of organ. One is called male sex organ, and the second one is called as female sex organ. It could be present in one individual or it could be present in two individuals. So, accordingly, the plant can be of unisexual or plant can be bisexual. Irrespective of the presence of these sex organ, then the male sex organ or the female sex organs are going to produce the gametes. So, in this case it is going to be male gametes, in this case it is going to be the female gamete, and then the male and female gametes are going to fuse with each other and they will form the zygote, and then zygote will develop into the embryo, and then embryo will develop into the new plant. In this whole process, the male sex organ goes by a a division known as meiosis. So, the male sex organ is going to be diploid in both the cases, whereas the male or the female gametes are going to be haploid. When they will fuse again, the zygote is going to be diploid, and accordingly the embryo as well as the new plant is going to be diploid in nature. So, what you can see that in this kind of sexual reproduction mode, first of all you need a very specialized organs. One for the one is male sex organ, the other one is female sex organ. The male sex organ is going to produce the male gametes, the female sex organ is going to produce the female gametes, and then these two gametes are going to be fused, and the formation of male and female gametes are occurring through a specialized mechanism which involves the meiosis and the other kind of processes, and that actually reduces the number of chromosomes which are associated with the male and female gametes, and that actually eventually will fuse by a process known as fertilization to form the zygote, and then zygote will evolve or develop into the embryo, and the embryo will develop into the new plant. Now, the first and the foremost question comes that what is the advantage or the disadvantage of plant for going to the sexual reproduction? Because as you can see that the asexual reproduction is very simple and uncomplicated. For example, in any sexual reproduction mechanism, although we have not discussed in detail about the asexual reproduction here, but there are many more other modes of asexual reproduction, and the asexual reproduction is ideally be very simple compared to the mechanism which are involved in developing the going for the sexual reproduction. Even then, the plants have evolved to do the sexual reproduction. So, the first question comes, what is the advantage of a plant to go for the sexual reproduction? As the mechanism suggests, the sexual reproduction involves the very specialized male sex organ as well as the female sex organ, and they will form the male and female gametes which fuse together. So, because of that, they are always being used as a mechanism to generate the different types of traits, or they are actually used to acquire the different types of traits. Okay. You can imagine that there is a plant 1 and you can have a plant 2. Okay. This plant is insect resistance. This plant is for example, having a colored flower. So, this plant is very good for pollination. This plant is very good in protecting himself from insect. Okay. Now, if the plant 1 and plant 2, suppose the plant 1 is male and plant B is female. Okay. So, female individual of plant 2, the male individual of plant 1 come together. So, they will form the male gamete. This one is going to form the female gamete. Okay. And then eventually they will going to go for fertilization, and they will form a zygote followed by embryo followed by new plant. Okay. So, in this case what you will see that after the fertilization, when the zygote is going to form, it is going to have two different character. One is it is going to be insect resistance. The number 2, it is going to be having a beautiful flower, or I will say colored flower. So, now this plant, the new plant, which is actually a hybrid plant, if I say. So, this hybrid plant is actually going to be a new species, and this hybrid plant is going to have the resistance against insect, number 1, and it is going to be more attractive for pollination. This means this plant or this hybrid plant species which is evolved by these two plants. For example, in this case the plant 1 is actually a insect resistance, but it is lacking a very beautiful colored flower. So, because of that the pollination of this particular species is going to be very low. The pollination frequency is going to be very low, and that is how the number of copies which are going to be produced by plant 1 is going to be very less compared to. Similarly, in the plant 2 it has a very beautiful flower. So, the pollination efficiency is very high, but it is sensitive for the insect attacks. Okay. So, in that case the plant 2 is also susceptible for the insects, and that is why the plant 2 species is also not very it is not going to propagate. But because they can follow a sexual reproduction mechanisms, they can actually generate a hybrid variety, and this hybrid variety can be used, can have the new species, and this new species actually will have the resistance against the insect, and it also can have a very high efficiency of pollination. So, that is the first advantage. The first advantage of sexual reproduction is that it allows the recombination of genetic material to acquire new traits. Okay. Now, these new traits could be in terms of having a beautiful flower. This beautiful flower could be in terms of having a combination of different types of colors in the flower petal itself, or it could be in terms of having entirely different kinds of flower. So, that actually is going to help in the pollination. Okay. And the pollination is very important for the success of sexual reproduction in plant. Number B, since they are talking about the new traits, it also can be in the new traits in terms of helping the formation of embryo and seeds and the embryo which are having the higher level of viability. Then number 3, we have already discussed a case of insect resistance, but it could be the resistance against any kind of environmental factor. It could be any environmental factor like the water, it could be for air, it could be against the pollen pollution, it could be against the wind, and it could be against the all sorts of infectious things, insects, molds and other kind of stuff. Okay. The other advantage is that the sexual reproduction always allows the keeping the maintaining the genetic pool. Okay. So, means you might have seen that the male sex organ as well as the female sex organ is actually going with a meiosis division, and that is causing the generation of male gametes as well as the female gametes, and both of these male gametes or the female gametes are haploids, and when they come together they will form the diploids. This means there is always a maintenance of the genetic pool, means there will always a maintenance of the genetic material, means it started with the diploid species and it always ends up into the diploid species. So, that particular kind of continuity always been maintained in the case of sexual reproduction. Now, if there are so many advantages, there are also disadvantages of going for the sexual reproduction. What are the disadvantages of sexual reproduction? One of the major disadvantage of sexual reproduction is that it is very complicated. Okay. It involves many steps. Few of the steps I have shown, that how the male sex organ as well as the female sex organ form the gametes. Gamete have to fuse, they go for, then they will form the zygote, then zygote will form the embryos, and embryo will then form the will present in the seed, then seed will grow and germinate and give you the new plant. So, that actually has a many steps, and if there is any kind of problem, or if any of these steps will not go successfully, then the whole process of sexual reproduction will not go. Number 3 is the sexual reproduction mainly being dependent on formation of male and female gametes, and the formation of, and then their dispersal within the environment, so that the male gametes reaches to the female gametes and do the fertilization, and these kind of processes require lot of, it will always be dependent not only on the plant, it always depends on the factors which are working around the plant, and for example, the insects, animals and other kind of environmental factors. So, that is how it actually depends on many factors for example, the pollination. So, if the pollination is not going to happen, even if it is, then the male and female gametes will not come and fuse and form the zygotes. So, because of that, it always depends on the many types of outside the plant factors. For example, the animals or the insects which have to carry the male gametes from the one plant to another plant, and then help in doing the fertilization. Number 4, as we said, these are the good advantages, that they are actually acquiring the resistance or acquiring the traits which are good for the plant, but they can also acquire the traits which are not good for the plant. So, traits not good for the plant. So, these are the advantages as well as the disadvantages of the plants goes for the sexual reproduction, but there are many more advantages than the disadvantages, because the plants are going for the sexual reproduction, and that is actually evolving over the course of time to reduce these factors, reduce these these disadvantages. Okay. So, let us see how the sexual reproduction or in general the reproduction is being evolved within the different plant groups to take care of, to focus more on the sexual reproduction, as well as on the other hand to reduce the chances of its failure. So, we have algae, we have Bryophyta, we have Pteridophyta, then we have Gymnosperms, and then ultimately we have Angiosperms. These are the primitive plants, okay, or I will say primitive plant like, okay, whereas these are, this is the seed bearing plant, the first time when the seed has been appeared, and these are the flower bearing plants. Okay. So, how the reproduction mechanism works in this? In this case, the whether it is algae, Bryophyta or Pteridophyta, in fact, in the case of fungi also, what we have is, we have two different species. One is called the gametophyte, and the other species is called sporophyte. Okay. So, gametophyte is forming the gametes, okay, and these gametes are then going for the fusion, and they are forming the zygote, okay, and then zygote is evolving into a cell body known as the sporozoid, a sporophyta. A sporophyta then goes for the division, okay, and it forms the different types of spores. So, sporophyte is diploid, whereas the gametophyte is haploid, and this division is mitosis. Okay. So, the gametophyte goes for the mitotic division, and then it forms the gametes. It could be male or female gametes. They will fuse and form the zygote. Then zygote will go for the mitotic division, and it will grow and form the sporophyte. Sporophytes then will go for the meiosis to form the spores, and then these spores will grow and form the gametophyte. Okay. So, they are haploids. So, as soon as there will be a meiosis in the sporophyte, it will go for the spore formation, and the spores are haploid in nature, and they will grow by a mitotic division to give you the haploid gametophyte. Okay. So, in these kind of primitive reproduction mechanisms, the plants are mostly been going with the so these two gametophyte or the sporophytes are two individual different plants species. They could be come together also, but in many of these cases, because these are the primitive plants, they are always growing separately. So, and the communication or the development from the gametophyte to sporophyte or sporophyte to gametophyte is always involving the always happening outside the plant, it is not happening inside the plant. And so, because of that there are a lot of disadvantages. There are a lot of disadvantages means that suppose the gametophyte has formed the gametes, those gametes will fuse with each other only in the external environment. So, this fusion is going to happen in the outside the plant, means either in the water or air or any other kind of in medium. So, if that medium is going to destroy these gametes, because for example, the external environment is not good for the fusion, then these gametes are going to dead. Okay. Even if suppose the gametes got fused, the zygote is formed, zygote may not evolve into the sporophyte because they may also get damaged. Once the sporophyte is formed, the sporophytes will go for the meiosis, spores are formed, spores may not develop into the gametophyte. So, because of that, the maintaining the sexual reproduction cycle in these kind of plant is very limited. So, most of these plants actually goes for the asexual mode or the vegetative propagation. Because the sexual reproduction is still under very primitive state, there are more chances of failure rather than the getting a very well defined, very specialized machinery, so that it could happen in a efficient manner and give you the success in terms of sexual reproduction. So, these kind of problems have been overcome by in the gymnosperms. So, in the case of gymnosperm, which is actually the first plant where the seeds are being appeared, okay, and these seeds bearing plants are actually seeds are present in the specialized structures known as the cones. So, these specialized structures are known as the cone, and in this case what happen is gymnosperm is also forming the male gametes as well as the female gametes, and now the male and female are fusing, forming the zygote. Zygote is then eventually will develop into embryo, and this embryo is present in the form of a seed, and this seed is not being thrown into the environment. Okay, this seed is being stored in a specialized machinery known as the cone, and this cone actually protects the seed from the adverse environmental condition, and because of that the success of the sexual reproduction goes up in the case of gymnosperm. But still these kind of classes of molecules or these kind of classes of plants have not evolved the male or the female sex organs in a very defined way. So, because of that still there is a failure at the stage of where the male sex organ as well as the female sex organs are forming the gametes, but these gametes are facing problem in terms of getting the fusion. So, those kind of problems are being taken care by the angiosperm, and that is why the angiosperms are considered to be the most evolved plants present on the earth. So, in this case what they have done, they have actually taken the male as well as the female sex organs, and then they have put these male and female sex organ into a combined structure, and that combined structure is known as the flower, and that is why the appearance of flower is only happening in the case of angiosperms. There are no reports previously that the flowers are present in the case of gymnosperms. So, what is the advantage of flower? The advantage of flower is that it contains the male as well as the female sex organ in a well defined structure or in a well defined manner, and it is also been enclosed into a structure. So, because of that the male or female sex organs are protected from the environmental damages, and on the other hand, because the male and female organs are present in a well defined structures, their formation of male gametes and the female gametes is more, and on the other hand the fusion of these male and female gametes and the formation of seeds and formation of fruits is all happening on this flower, within this flower, and because of that the efficiency of sexual reproduction is going up in the case of the angiosperms. The flower is not being evolved in a single day. Flower is being evolved by considering the problems what gymnosperms were facing, because the gymnosperms are having all the male and the female sex organs open. There were chances when the male or the female gametes are getting damaged. So, because of that the concept of flower came up, and that flower is evolved into the angiosperms by a very specialized scheme. How the flower is evolved? So, this is just the hypothetical scheme which is not been ever proved by doing the experimental mechanisms. So, in this kind of the hypothetical scheme, what people have proposed that the earlier on the leaves itself the sporangia is present. Okay. So, what is mean by sporangia is that it is actually the sex organs, but these kind of sporangias were unprotected, they were not enclosed. So, because of that what happened is these leaves started curling inside. Okay. So, they will started curling like this, and sporangia is getting enclosed within this leaf. Okay. And then ultimately these leaves started curling further up, and as a result you started developing the flower like this. Okay, where the sporangia is present in the center, and then this got evolved into a flower like structure, and the sporangias are present in the center, and this is what the typical flower is look like. You can see that this is the individual leaves, individual petals, and in the center you have the male or the female sex organs which are arranged, and this is what the typical flower or the primitive flower is look like, and that is the mechanism by which the flower is evolved. But as I said, this is a hypothetical model to explain the flower formation or the flower development or flower evolution within the angiosperms, but there is no experimental or the systematic experiments are being conducted to prove or the disprove this kind of mechanisms. But irrespective of any of these mechanisms, the flower is evolved where it is having a very well defined structures with a very well defined arrangement of the different male or the female sex organs. So, let us see how the different types of molecule, different types of plant parts, flower parts are being arranged on the flower. So, as you can see on the PowerPoint slide, you can see a structure of a flower. So, what you can see is actually a flower with consist of a typical flower is consist of the four rolls, means the 4 circles in which the flower parts are arranged. What are these 4 parts? The outer part is known as the so outer part is known as the calyx. Okay. Then within the calyx we have the corolla, and then within the corolla we have the male sex organ, which is called as the stamen or the androsium, and then we have the gynosium or the carpel, which is the innermost part. So, starting from the calyx, this is the outermost roll of the flower leaves. The individual leaf segment of a calyx is known as the sepal. They are mostly the calyx are green in color, and their main job is to protect the flower from getting the dehydration. But in some cases the leaves are, these sepals are also be present as a different color, and in those cases the calyx is called as the petaloids. So, when the calyx is green in color, it is called as the sepal. When the calyx is present in any different color, it is called as the petaloid. As I discussed before, the main function of the calyx is to protect the inner part of the plant, especially when it is present in the form of buds, by the loss of water from the inner part of the plant. So, you can imagine that the flower is always been present in the form of bud, and the bud is at that time the calyx is the outermost closing of the flower, and it actually protects the plant from losing the water. The other function of the calyx, especially when the calyx is colored rather than the green color, it attracts the insects as well. As soon as the flower bud opens, the calyx sometime get fall from the flower, or in some cases it remain associated with the plant. So, it is particular up to the different flower whether the calyx will remain associated with the flower throughout its journey from the bud opening to the fruit formation, or in some cases it may fall. The second row of the plant flower part is known as the corolla. The corolla is inner reel of the flower part next to the calyx. The flowers are the individual leaves of the corolla is known as the petals. These are colored, they are not in green color, they are of different colors, and sometimes they are also fragrance, so that it becomes they should attract the insects and the other animals for the pollination. Their main job is to attract the insects as well as the other animals for the pollination. The corolla or the sepal or the calyx actually are the non-essential or the sterile part of the plant flower, and they are not being taken part into any kind of sexual reproduction. They are also forming a outer envelope, so that they can protect the androsium or the gynosium. Next to the corolla we have the androsium. This is the third roll of wheel floral appendages that arises inner side to the corolla. The individual appendages within the androsium is known as the stamen, which represent actually the male sex organ. So, androsium or the stamen is the male sex organ. It has two parts, one is called anther and the other part is called the filament. And the part which connects the anther to the filament is called as the connective. Each stamen is consist of the anther is the part where it has a pollen sac. So, in some cases it has two pollen sac and the four pollen sac. Within the pollen sac they contain the pollen grain, and these pollen grains are the male sex gametes, which actually travels from the one plant to another plant. The function of the male sex organ is to generate the male sex gametes, and then the male sex gametes can go from one plant to another plant. and they will go for the fertilization. Similarly, they have the gynosium. The gynosium or the it is the innermost roll of the flower appendages known as the carpels. So, carpel is actually the female sex organ. It contains 3 parts. One is called stigma, style, or the inner part is the ovary. The ovary is actually the main sex organ where the fertilization take place, and it actually produces the egg which participate into the fertilization event, and then the fruit development as well as the seed development actually take place within this part. The other part, the style or the stigma, is only being a medium through which the pollen grains travel within the female sex organ. So, accordingly, because the so as you can see in a flower diagram, the structures of a flower, there are 4 reels, okay, calyx, corolla, androsium and gynosium. So, the flower could be classified based on whether they have these 4 parts. So, if they contain all these 4 parts, they are called as the complete flower. If any of these 4 parts are missing, they are called as the incomplete flower. In addition to that, the flowers could be of 2 different types. The flower could be of 2 different types. One is called the male flower or the female flower, depending on whether they contain only the male sex organ or the female sex organ, but the flower could be of bisexual in nature as well. So, as you can see, as we have discussed actually, that the so you can see that the flower okay. So, this is the calyx, corolla, this is the stamen or androsium, and this is the gynosium. Okay. So, if you can arrange and see that these are the 4 wheels which are present within the flower structures, but these 4 structures could be explained or could be written in the form of a formula. So, when you write these kind of arrangement of these 4 flower part into a form of a formula, then it is called as the floral formula. In the floral formula, what you can use, so you can use the defined terms for each and every part of the plant, and then you can define whether the what is the arrangement of these different plants. So, as you can see on the PowerPoint slide, you can see that the for example, if the plant has the calyx, you can write the K, and if it contains, for example, the 5 sepals, then you can write the K5. Okay. Similarly, if it contains corolla, the corolla, for corolla you can write C, and it can, suppose it contains 6 petals, then you can write C6. For androsium you have to write A, and if it contains 5 stamen, means if it contains the 5 pollen tubes, then you can write the A5. Similarly, for gynosium you can write G, and if it contains 5 carpels, then you can write the G5. I have given the 2 examples, where in one example I have given the mustard. So, what you can see is actually that it is a male and female plant. So, it is actually a bisexual plant, means it contains both the androsium and gynosium within the plant. Then it contains the corolla, where the arrangement is 2 plus 2, whereas the corolla is 4 and the androsium is 2 plus 4, means the 2 are outside and 4 are inside, and then it has a gynosium which is 2 actually. And as you can see, they are being enclosed within the bracket, means the gynosium is together or the fused. Similarly, for hibiscus, I have written this is the K5, C5, A infinite and G5. So, K5 means the corolla are 5 and these called corollas are fused. Similarly, the corolla is 5, but they are not fused, and A is Androsium and it contains the infinite number of stamens, and that is why the number is infinite, and then it contains G5 means Gynosium is 5, but those are fused to form a single petal, a single pollen tube. So, this is all about the flower and its arrangement. What is mean by the Flora diagram is that if you write, so this is actually the floral formula that you can write the arrangement in the on a 2D in a 1D structure, but if you want to write, you can actually make a diagram of the arrangement of the stamen and corolla, and in that case it is called as the floral diagram. So, for the study of taxonomy or for the study of different flowers, we normally use these two formula or as well as the diagram to represent the particular plant or particular flower, and that actually helps in understanding or getting the complete property of that particular flower or the family. So, what is the function of a flower? Or as I said, what is the utility of evolving a very primitive sex organ or sexual reproduction into a very specialized sexual machinery, because it has evolved into a flower. And what is the function of a flower? Number 1, the primary function of a flower is to protect the sex organs. Number 2, attract the insects and other animals. So, flower is doing two jobs. One, it is protecting the sex organs. So, there is a more efficiency of by the sex organs to produce the respective male or the female gametes. On the other hand, since attracts the insects and the other animals, the travel of these male gametes or the female male gametes from the one flower to another flower is also very high. Number 3, it allows the development of fruits. So, now what we are going to discuss? We are going to discuss that different parts of the flowers, and so in the coming lecture we are going to discuss about the 4 major part. One is we are going to talk about the calyx, we are going to talk about the corolla, we are going to start by the stamen or the androsium, and we are also going to talk about the gynosium or the female sex organ. Okay. So, and in addition we are also going to discuss couple of questions related to this topic. Thank you.